Hello and welcome to Sweet to Neat, our bourbon journey. Today we're talking bad whiskey. It's been a little crazy here this week, so my queen of everything is indisposed for a little bit. I wanted to still follow up on last week's trip to the blind spot where we reviewed some starter pours with a list of whiskeys I'd avoid as an early bourbon drinker. So I'm at the bourbon bookshelf alone discussing these surprising bottles, many of which others recommend as starters when you're new to bourbon. I'm Rich, the medicine man. Before we get into it, the most important point is that if you don't like a whiskey, especially a fresh crack of a new bottle, give it a few weeks and go back to it and try it again, because you may find the whiskey has mellowed, your tastes have changed or developed further. So even though you didn't like something initially, always give it a second try. In general, also, as you're getting into whiskey, I would try to avoid high proof or high cost whiskeys until you get a better feel for what you like, so that you don't overwhelm yourself or spend a lot of money on something you find out you don't like. Getting into today's whiskeys, the first one on the list is Wild Turkey 101, and this was one of my original whiskeys. In fact, it's been quite a while because of this whiskey was a little too much when I was back in college. A lot of people are big fans of Wild Turkey 101, but also the more recent bottles of Wild Turkey 101 seem to have changed from what others who've been in whiskey the past few years have been commenting about online, that Wild Turkey seems to be diverting more of their good barrels into their higher end offerings, and that Wild Turkey 101 seems to be suffering. Wild Turkey 101 is the traditional Wild Turkey mash bill of 75% corn, 13% rye, and 12% malted barley, and as the name implies, it's 101 proof. On the nose, there's a fair amount of ethanol from this whiskey, and a little bit of oakiness, but I don't get a lot else from Wild Turkey 101 these days. On the palate, it is just oak, and that fairly quickly fades. For a 101 proof, I don't get a ton of burn from this. Page's gas tank would probably put this at 5/8 or 3/4 if I were to guess. But still, the taste just isn't there, and the nose just isn't there. So I don't think it's as great an introduction to bourbon as it used to be. Moving on, and I have to apologize, this is a fill-in bottle. I hope to put a different bottle on the screen. The one that I really wanted to talk about was Knob Creek 9. Many bourbon lovers out there rave about Knob Creek 9 as a budget pour. I tried it again and again and again, and I just couldn't get into the flavor of it. I tried Knob Creek 12 to see if, maybe it's a little different, and I found it very similar in taste, so that's what I'm using to taste, because we literally used up the 375 of Knob Creek 9 as a mixer just to get rid of it, because neither of us, myself or Peggy, enjoyed it as a neat pour. And that brings up the point. When you're trying whiskeys, if you find a 375, I recommend starting with that, because it's a more economical way, rather than paying the full shot for a 750, of finding out if you like something. Plus, if you save the smaller bottles, as your bottles get down, you may want to pour them off into the 375s. Some people say if they sit for too long at more than half empty, that the whiskey starts to degrade. Getting into the nose and taste of, in this case, Knob Creek 12. Oh, and I forgot to say, the Knob Creek 9 has the same mash bill as the Wild Turkey of 75% corn, 13% rye, 12% malted barley. The Knob Creek 12 is 100 proof, so it's pretty comparable to what I recall the Knob Creek 9. This does have a better nose, ethanol, but more intense oakiness, little bit of sweetness. Really don't get a lot of fruit notes on this or anything beyond the oakiness and sweetness. Intense oakiness and pretty intense ethanol on the palate, and actually a very quick finish for even this, the 12 year. Yeah, I just get the oak, a little bit better finish on the second sip, but I'm just not a Knob Creek fanboy. Four Roses is something that a lot of whiskey tubers rave about, especially the single barrels. I admit I've got to go back and try some more single barrels, but I had a really bad experience with this one. The single barrels that aren't designated apparently all share the same mash bill of 60% corn, 35% rye, and 5% malted barley, and are 100 proof. This particular single barrel is from Warehouse HW and barrel 46-5R. On the nose, I get a little hint of fruit, little hint of ethanol. The palate is a little bitter, oaky, a little sharp, a little astringent, and a bit of unpleasant burn at the end. Not a real Kentucky hug, just a burn in the back of the throat. Let me try it again. The second taste does mellow a little bit, but just oak and really not a lot of redeeming qualities in my book. Our fourth surprising one I recommend not starting with, it's the Bardstown Origin Series Bottled in Bond. Many people love the Bardstown, and there are some other Bardstowns I do enjoy, but the Bottled in Bond bourbon, it's 100 proof because it's bottled in bond, and we'll go over some of the different vocabulary associated with the whiskey in a future video. It's 68% corn, 20% wheat, and 12% malted barley for the mash bill. So this is actually a wheated bourbon. I tend to like wheated bourbons more, but this one just doesn't do it. Not much of a nose at all. Just faint oakiness. On the palate, just a little oak, very little of the sweetness that a lot of wheated bourbons are supposed to impart. And a pretty quick finish. A little bit of a Kentucky hug with that one. Finally, for ones that I wouldn't start with, the Green River Kentucky Straight Bourbon 90 proof. This is a mash bill of 70% corn, 21% winter rye, and 9% of two types of malted barley. Green River is technically owned by Bardstown, but this probably is still from distillate before Bardstown owned Green River. This one actually has a decent nose. Sweetness and oak without overpowering ethanol. Getting a little bit of almost a pear note. On the palate, it's a little cooler, a nice oakiness, a little sweet, no overpowering ethanol. Second sip does give a pretty good Kentucky hug at the end. It's probably of the five, this is the one that is easiest to sip on. So if you were going to choose any of them to start with, the Green River is probably the one that's least likely to turn you off from bourbon. But overall, these are ones that I would wait on until you've had experience with several other bourbons before you give them a try. Some dishonorable mentions: the Jim Beam Black 7-Year is one that some people will promote as a starter bourbon. It's 90 proof. There's some debate online about the mash bill. It's whether it's the traditional Jim Beam mash bill or a little higher on the corn at 77%, 13% rye, and then 10 or 12% malted barley, depending on whether the corn has been bumped up a little bit in this one. It's 90 proof. It's bourbon. There's not a lot to promote this one as a particularly great introduction to the world of bourbon. And as much as I'm a Jack Daniel's fanboy, Jack Daniel's Old Number 7 is really not the place to start either. It's 80 proof, 80% corn, 12% barley, 8% rye. So it is a low rye bourbon. But again, the flavor profile, the finish just aren't there to really make this a great introduction to bourbon. I had said before that when you're new to bourbon, you in general want to avoid higher proof and higher cost. A quick exception to that, just given the timing, this Freedom 250 whiskey, I have to mention again, it is a delicious whiskey. It's not overpowering, it's nicely balanced. It is expensive. It's $150 a bottle, but it's a limited release, and you may want to consider, if you're just getting into whiskey and starting to enjoy whiskey or bourbon, giving this one a try if you can get it in the Tampa area. But remember, the way you enjoy your whiskey is the right way to enjoy your whiskey, and please enjoy responsibly. Please subscribe and share this with someone who you think would be interested, and thank you for being a part of our Bad Whiskey review. I had to hop back on with a quick addendum. I just mixed the Wild Turkey 101, the Knob Creek 12, the Four Roses Single Barrel, and the Bardstown Bottled in Bond Origin Series, and this is incredible. I can't believe how much difference the combination makes. There's a nice sweetness, a subtle oakiness on the nose. A soft, warm palate with oakiness and a little sweetness, a nice finish, a little Kentucky hug. This is absolutely delicious. I'll probably never be able to get this exact blend again, but I just had to share that sometimes mixing what doesn't work comes up with something incredible. Enjoy. So good.